What is going on, college basketball fans? Today we got the updated Dannyology Power 35 rankings. A lot of crazy stuff happened this week. We have a new number one. I'm ready to get started. Just want to say subscribe for more college basketball content, and let's go. All right, so like I mentioned, we do have a brand new number one. Our last number one was UConn. They held that number one spot for many, many, many weeks here on this channel. But they dropped down to number three after they not only lost in Omaha to Creighton, but they lost pretty badly. So that kind of dropped them down a little bit. I still think that UConn could possibly be the best team in college basketball, but after a loss like that, especially with how good of a week Houston had and how good they have been playing in the Big 12, they had to move up. And Jamal Shed especially, just on both sides of the court, going absolutely crazy, getting a win against Iowa State, then going on the road to Waco and beating Baylor in overtime. Not only did they win in overtime, but they were just a hair away from Jamal Shed winning on a buzzer beater at the end of regulation. Then they went on to win on the road in overtime. It is so hard to win games in the Big 12, let alone on the road, let alone on the road in overtime. That is very, very tough to do, especially against a very good disciplined team like Baylor does have under Scott Drew. So that was an amazing win. Two great wins for Houston this week. They've been playing so good in the best conference in college basketball. Houston ranks up here at number one this week. Number two, we do have Purdue. You could argue UConn should only drop to number two, but then again, Purdue was my number two last week, whereas Houston was my number three. So I thought Purdue didn't really do anything to deserve to drop. I decided to keep them here at number two. They've been playing great. Like I've been saying all season, Lance Jones has been such a great addition to this team, and all around they have improved. I like this Purdue team a lot. They're staying here at number two, dropping two spots from number one and number three. We do have UConn. Like I said, they did lose pretty badly to Creighton, but Creighton is a really good team. UConn was bound to lose one at some point. They're very easily still a number one seed as far as March Madness tournament, bracketology, that stuff goes. But yeah, they could get back up to number one. We'll see what happens. They're still playing amazing, amazing basketball. That's only their second conference loss this season. Number four, we do have North Carolina. North Carolina, they were looking really, really good. They had a little bit of a rough patch. They're starting to get it back. They're up back at number four, I think, jumping up two spots here this week. Jumping up also a spot or two this week is Tennessee. Tennessee also had a very good week, and I'm very excited for this team because not only do they look improved off last season, especially offensively, but Dalton Knecht, they have an actual bucket getter, shot maker on this team who can score on all three levels of the court. I think that is so huge for the Tennessee team. They're up here at number five. Number six, staying at number six, even though they lost this week to Houston. It was on the road. It was a close game. You can't really fault them for that. I'm keeping them at number six. They're not moving up. They're not moving down. Then they also went on to beat West Virginia later on in that week, which is not a great win, especially because it was way closer than I think it should have been, especially at home for Iowa State. But nonetheless, they did win after that loss to Houston. I'm deciding to keep them here at number six. They've been playing good all year, man. But they need a good week. They need a good week for sure. Number seven, we do have Kansas. I think they are jumping up, I think, one spot from last week here. 2-0 week. Nothing too special. They beat Texas. Texas not a bad team. They were my teams to watch last week. But Kansas beat them pretty bad at home, as expected. Kansas playing very good basketball right now. Arizona dropping down to number 8. I think they were my number 4 last week. Dropping down, lost to Washington State again. Swept by the Cougs this season, so that's not great, especially because that one came at home. So that one hurts Arizona. They have one of these every once in a while. They start to get back up in the top 5, and then they lose one. Just seems to happen with this Arizona team this year. Arizona dropping down to 8. Still think they are a top 10 team for sure. Jumping up, I think one spot is Marquette. After getting blown out by UConn last week, they had to drop for me. Bounced back this week pretty well. They're back up to number 9. Number 10, jumping into the top 10 this week, is the Kentucky Wildcats. You could say that this is too high for them, but with the way my rankings came out from last week, a lot of teams in front of them did lose. So it was like, And one of the teams in front of them was Alabama. Kentucky beat them, and they put up like 117 points on them. So, yeah, no doubt that Kentucky has one of the best offenses in the entire country. They have a very deep team. If they can find some defense on this team, Kentucky can 100% make a deep run in March Madness. Duke coming in here at number 11, dropping out of my top 10 this week after losing to Wake Forest. What an upset for the Demon Deacons. We'll talk about them later. They made it to the Power 35 this week after not being on it last week. They are looking like they are finally going to make the tournament, because for the past, I know for sure 2 years, but maybe even 3 years, Wake Forest has been right on the bubble of making March Madness, but they are unable to do it. But they look like they're going to do it this year. That win right there at Duke, or against Duke, was a big quad one win for them, and that's going to help a lot. Number 12, we do have St. Mary's. They're jumping up a few more spots. They're jumping up every week. They are still undefeated in West Coast Conference play. I mean, yeah, they're playing very good basketball. Creighton coming in here at number 13. They're still jumping up spots, even though they did just lose to St. John's yesterday on Sunday. They still had that amazing win over UConn, and still jumping them up, I think 2 or 3 spots. So even with that bad loss to St. John's, not a horrible loss on the road, that UConn win still does enough for me to move them up here a couple of spots. Auburn jumping up a couple of spots after a good week, 2-0 week, nothing special. They won some games they were supposed to win, got it done. They're up at 14. 15, we do have Alabama dropping a couple of spots after losing to Kentucky. They did beat Florida at home earlier in the week in a very good game. I thought Florida was going to beat them, and with Alabama being at home. That would not be a good loss for Alabama. Even though Florida's really good, you got to win those ones at home. But they were able to pull that one off, but then they lost to Kentucky. They're dropping a couple spots here at 15. Number 16, kind of similar to Creighton. They got a big win on the road at Arizona. Then they had a letdown game against Arizona State. But it was still enough for me to move them up about 3 spots here this week. Even though with the letdown game, Washington State's been on a very good, nice little 8-game stretch or so where they're playing amazing, including a road win at Arizona, was enough for me to move them up a couple more spots here to 16. Illinois dropping a little bit. They did lose to Penn State this week, so that wasn't great. Still believe they are a top 20 team, so I couldn't move them down too far. San Diego State is actually jumping up for me, not particularly because they got a couple of good wins, but just because I feel like I'm undervaluing the Mountain West as far as the past couple of weeks. So San Diego State's up 3 spots just because I don't want to undervalue the Mountain West. Mountain West is very good. I think they're better than Pac-12. I think they could be better than possibly, I don't want to say. They're definitely better than the Pac-12. They maybe could be better than 1 or 2 other Power 6 conferences. So I don't want to undersell the Mountain West, which is the reason why San Diego State, Utah State, them two especially, are moving up here in these rankings this week. But South Florida staying looking really good. They're on a big-time win streak. They got a big win against the FAU, and they're continuing to win this week. They clinched at least a share of the American Conference regular season championship this past weekend, so that is huge. I think that they're going to get that for sure. They're just looking really good. South Florida Bulls in the top 20 this week. How about them Bulls? Utah State, like I mentioned, they're jumping up this week just because Utah State, San Diego State have been so good in the Mountain West. I feel like I was undervaluing them, so they had to jump up here in the top 20 this week. Baylor, rough week for Baylor. I already mentioned they lost to overtime at home to Houston. That's not a horrible loss, even though it was at home. You want to win those in overtime, in conference. But, yeah, they lost there, and then they also lost to BYU on the road earlier this week as well. So they're dropping a little bit here down to 21. 22, we do have Florida. I think they're staying in the exact same spot as they were last week, even though they did lose to Alabama. That was on the road, and that was a very close game. They had opportunities to win that game. It was really looking like they were going to win that game. So I don't want to fault them too much for that, and then they go on and beat Vandy later on in the week. I kept them in the same spot. I don't feel like they deserve to drop down for that one. South Carolina's up a couple of spots here this week after a good 2-0 week, looking a lot better, looking to secure their spot here in March Madness. Gamecocks, Florida, 2 sleepers in the SEC to definitely keep an eye out for. Dayton coming in here at 24. They're dropping a couple spots this week. They did lose to George Washington. Was it George Washington or was it George Mason? I believe it was George Washington. Either way, it's not that good of a loss. Dayton had to drop out of the top 20 this week down to 24. Wisconsin's jumping back up into the top 25 with a good win over Maryland this week. They only played once. Looking a lot better. They were on a little bit of a loss streak where they lost like 5 of their last 6. They dropped all the way into the 30s for me. Back up in the top 25 just because they've been playing good all season. They got a win this week. They need to keep that up, and they will easily be in the top 20 again next week if they can win 2 games. Boise State jumping into the top 35 this week here at 26. Boise State's been playing so good in the Mountain West, and Mountain West is such a good conference. Like I said, I've been undervaluing it. Boise deserves to be on this list. They're here at 26. 27, we do have Texas Tech. I'm going to go and talk about these next 3 Big 12 teams all in a row because they are so close. Texas Tech, TCU, BYU, they're all kind of similar. They win their home games like you're supposed to. Like you're supposed to. They struggle more on the road, win more at home. That's kind of what you expect, especially in the Big 12. All 3 of these teams are very, very close right now, and I feel like this is perfect range for them. If any of them have a good week, they could jump easily in the top 25, maybe even to the top 20. Texas Tech, TCU, BYU, all looking pretty solid. Texas Tech actually did beat TCU this week in Lubbock, but then they go on the road and lose to Central Florida. That is a bad loss. That is probably the worst loss you can have in the Big 12 is losing to either Central Florida or maybe West Virginia. It was on the road, so you don't want to fault them too much. But they are dropping out of the top 20 where they were, I think, at 19 last week. Texas Tech down 27. Clemson at 30. Clemson here at 30. I think they're around the same spot as last week. Clemson is a big-time sleeper for me. But in ACC play, they just have struggled to be consistent. We'll see if they can build some consistency this week and climb those rankings. Wake Forest joining in the top 35 this week. Much deserving. They've been playing so good. They had a blowout win against Pitt, which I was getting a little bit high on Pitt recently. They've been playing good, and they get a win over Duke. That was such a huge win for them. I'm so happy that we are finally going to see the Demon Deacons in March once again this year. It looks like they have it on lockdown. 32, we do have Seton Hall. Seton Hall had a good win this week. I think they're up 1 or 2 spots from last week. Northwestern, they were my teams to watch last week. They had a decent week. They are in the top 35 here at 33. And then we ended off with 2 Mountain West teams, Colorado State and Nevada, which I believe are just right there, close to each other. Colorado State, Nevada, Boise, San Diego State, Utah State, New Mexico. All 6 of these teams should be tournament teams. And they are all very close. Teams to watch New Mexico. New Mexico did drop out of my rankings this week, even though I am very high on New Mexico. They had a bad loss to Air Force at home in the Pit. Air Force, one of the worst teams in the Mountain West. Gotta watch out for those Service Academy teams, though. They can pull one out probably once a year, man. They're gonna pull one out, but in the Pit, that is rough. And New Mexico, they also had an 0-2 week this week, including that loss, so that was rough. They had to follow my rankings, but they're right there. I'm still very high on them. I'm still very high on New Mexico going far in March. They have an excellent squad. 3 amazing guards, good front court, well coached. I like the Lobos, but right now they had to fall out my rankings. FAU also fell out of the rankings with a loss to Memphis. They just continue to struggle on the road. Oklahoma, it was in my teams to watch last week. They're back in it here again this week. They didn't play well enough this week to deserve to make it in. Gonzaga, I think Gonzaga could probably deserve to be in my rankings. I might be underrating them a little bit because they've been playing very good. as of late. You know, they got that win in Rupp Arena against Kentucky, and then they've been playing good. So I actually think that I messed up there. I think Gonzaga should be in the Power 35. Let me know what you guys think. Appalachian State lost last week. They bounced back with a good week this week. I was actually at the Marshall App State game this week, and yeah, they looked really good. They were down at halftime. Good teams prevail, and they shot well from the three. They looked pretty good. They have a lot of size on that team. Some guards that have some good handles, man. They looked very, very solid. App State on the teams to watch once again this week. Nebraska looked pretty good this week. They're on my teams to watch. Mississippi State's on my teams to watch. They're looking pretty good out of the SEC. Here and there, they have their moments. Virginia had a horrible week. Yes, they did lose to North Carolina. It's not the worst loss in the world. But to lose to Virginia Tech like they did by, like, oh my gosh, what was it, like 30 points? Yeah, that was rough. That was a rough one for Virginia. They were on a big streak, you know, a couple weeks ago, and now Virginia's come back down to earth. But yeah, that's going to do it for this one. Let me know who you guys think I snubbed. I think I snubbed Gonzaga. I think Gonzaga should probably be not only in the top 35, but closer to top 25. Probably in the 30 to 25 range. So I think I actually snubbed Gonzaga. But let me know who should be higher, who should be lower, who got snubbed. And you guys subscribe for more college basketball content. That is going to do it for this video. And thank you so much for watching.